Thank you, Tom, for this very nice time I am spending here. And so what I am going to talk about is recent work done with people at the Technion and with Thierry Bodino in Paris, Eric Ackermann and his student at the Technion. Okay, so I gave this talk 2 months ago in Paris, and so this was the outline I had. Says a few things about current fluctuations, explain what is a Fano factor that people study, and how one can predict this Fano factor using a macroscopic fluctuation theory. And the main result will be that one dimension behaves in a very similar way, but not only in a qualitative, but also in a quantitative way, as higher dimensional system. But because I was visiting here, I have added 2 things just to mention at some stage, KPZ and random matrices, but it will be very short. And I am sure that people in the audience know much more than I do about random matrices, so please correct me if I say something which is not correct. Now, the problem I want to describe is the following. I have a system, and the system I wait for a very long time. The system is here, and it's connected to 2 reservoirs of particles. In fact, it could be also 2 heat baths. The story would be exactly the same, but here I'll talk about particles. And so I have a certain density here, another density there, and if you wait for very long, then the system will reach a steady state. And the kind of question we want to ask is, what is the average current? This is just, I count how many particles have been transferred during time t, but because I am in the steady state, it does not matter really where I measure it. This is a classical system. I can measure it here or there or anywhere. So that's average current. I might be interested in the fluctuation of the current. What is the variance of this current? What is its distribution? And so on, especially this distribution. Okay, now, what should I expect, especially when the time is very large? I expect the following, that if I take the generating function of the total current, that in the long time limit, it should behave like exponential t times mu of lambda. And the reason for that is, okay, you can ask why this t, and it's a little bit like taking the thermodynamic limit. Imagine that my system is finite and has some finite relaxation time, then essentially if you look at a very long time and you decompose it into windows which are much longer than these relaxation times, then essentially you are adding independent random variables. And if Qt was the sum of independent random variables, then the generating function would be exponential, a linear exponential of a linear function of time. So this is somewhat totally obvious. And the question is, can you say something about this mu of lambda, how these cumulants, these moments are related, and so on?
And you're going to claim that it doesn't really matter what the system is in between.
Yes. Okay, so we'll talk about one-dimensional system first, but then we will see more complicated geometry. And the main goal of the talk is to say that the things behave the same way. Okay, so there is one case which can be solved very easily. It's when you take independent particles. So if here particles are emitted, there could be, for example, an ideal gas. Particles are emitted, and then they cross the system freely, or they are emitted, they start to make a random walk, or they are emitted and they make some more complicated kind of walks, like a Levy flight. Then in this case, computing the average current, computing all the cumulants is very easy. And the answer is the following, is that the generating function takes this explicit form, and there is just one parameter which corresponds to the kind of dynamics, to the rate at which particle enters, and so on. But mu of lambda takes always this form. Okay, maybe it's okay. Let me just explain where it comes from, but the thing you can realize if you believe this formula, which I think it's really a Poisson process, so I think it's more or less obvious, but I realized that when we said that in one paper, we had big problems with the referee who was ready to believe it is true for this case, but not for that one. But anyway, it's always true. And it turns out that if you look at the quantity that people in solid-state physics look at, they call the Fano factor, which is just the ratio of the first two cumulants. The ratio is exactly 1. In fact, if you were not counting the number of particles, but if you were counting the charge, then the ratio would be Q, because it would be the charge of each elementary particle, because Qt would be the number of particles times Q, and so you would get an extra factor Q. So when particles are independent, this ratio is 1, and that's it. Now, let's come to situation, and the reason I try to explain it quickly here, the reason is that you can think that if the particles are independent during every small time interval, dt, there is a probability, say p dt, that a particle is emitted here, and that this particle will cross so that it will contribute to the total current. And if you look at the generating function of lambda q, you decompose the time into very short time interval, and in each short time interval, there is a probability 1 minus p dt that no particle is emitted, which will cross the system, and there is p dt that there is 2 dt here. Sorry, there is p dt exponential lambda that it will cross, and so you get immediately this formula by exponentiating. So that's easy. So the main thing to remember is that if the particles are independent, the Fano factor is 1. Now, we will consider now a model, the simple exclusion process first, but then we will see that some results are more general. And then this model, now I want to see what the Fano factor looks like for this model. So the simple exclusion process is a model of interacting particles, but in a very simple way. You have particles which diffuse on the line. So each particle can jump to a neighboring site at a rate 1, but then there is this rule that the particles cannot jump, a particle cannot jump on a site which is already occupied. So the particle diffuse, and then some particles are injected on the left, some particles are injected also on the right or removed with some rates, which are here, and this has the effect that this chain is maintained in contact between two reservoirs. These parameters represent the effect of reservoirs, and if I give you these two parameters, they correspond to some density rho A on the left and rho B on the right, given by this formula. So if you make some choice of these parameters, you end up with a system out of equilibrium. And the question is, what is the generating function of the cumulants? Can you predict it? How different it is from the case of independent particles? Okay, so there are several ways, which I will essentially discuss later, the macroscopic way of solving this problem, but it can be attacked by microscopic ways, because one can use things like Bethe-Ansatz or perturbation theory, or one can try to study it by computer. So one can study this problem by various ways, and the way I will describe later briefly will be to write a field theory for if the system is very large, locally you have a certain density near position x at time t, and a certain local current, and there is a certain action that we will use, which I write here, and I'll explain it a little more later. So there are several ways of attacking this problem, and let me just first tell you what you get for this one-dimensional case. Because of these many ways, then you can compute the average current, the variance of the current. In fact, these calculations are rather elementary, as long as you don't want to go to higher cumulants. And these are the results that you get. The first one is that the average current is proportional to the difference of density on both sides times 1 over L. So it's an example of a system which satisfies Fick's law, because Fick's law is just that the current is proportional to the gradient of the density. So this is rho A minus rho B divided by the length. This is the gradient. And you can compute the second cumulant. It's a little more difficult. You get a closed formula. But the outcome of it is that if you come back to the situation I had at the beginning, that is, here it's totally full, here it's totally empty, you get from this formula that the ratio of the two cumulants is not 1, but it's 1/3. And you can compute higher cumulants, it's 1/15. So you get this 1/3, so this is
And rho A and rho B in the integral?
sorry?
You say for rho A.
For rho A, otherwise you have different expression.
Yeah, but it always stays below 1?
Okay, you have to make the ratio. It turns out that if rho B is 0 and rho A is very small, imagine that the density is very small, you get 1 because they are independent. But it turns out that this is this 1/3. And what I'm going to tell you anyway is that if I know the answer for one choice, I can transform it in a very simple way to any choice. We'll come to that. Okay, so it's 1/3. And in fact, you can calculate not, as I said, you have many approaches. Let me just give you the result. You can calculate it not only for density 1 and 0, but for any density. As I said, in the long time limit, the generating function is exponential t times mu of lambda. And it comes as a surprise that, in fact, the mu here depends on the lambda, this parameter in the generating function, on the densities on the two sides, maybe on the way you establish the contact and so on. But it turns out that for this system, it always depends, instead of depending on these three parameters, it depends on one single parameter. And I'll try to explain that towards the end, but that has to do probably with the fact that the system can be solved by better on that and so on. It is that you could say it depends on lambda, rho A, and rho B, but the answer is that it depends on a single parameter, omega, and this omega is a combination of all these parameters like that. Okay, here I have a plus because when I was preparing my talk, I borrowed the formula from our paper, and unfortunately in our paper there is a minus sign, which I realized when I prepared this talk. So, okay, and because you can solve the problem, you can get a closed expression for this R. So you have the generating function for all rho A, rho B, and so on, and this is a closed expression that you get. And in fact, this expression turns out to be the same as the one that people have found a long time ago, so here in 92, 95, for the universal statistics of fermions in disordered conductors. So this is what I will discuss later about the link with random matrices. So somehow here we have a system for which we can calculate all the cumulants. It's a one-dimensional system, and we get the Fano factor to be 1/3.
So this is done with beta-ansatz,
This
calculation, or can you do without it?
You can do it by the macroscopic theory. I'll explain how you can get it by the macroscopic theory. You can get it by perturbation also. But I think the easiest probably is by the macroscopic theory that I explain a little later. Okay, something which is remarkable is the following, is that if you work in a very special case where the two densities are 1/2, so somehow this is an equilibrium system. You have a system, the two densities on both sides are the same, but still there is a question of how much current is crossing the system. You have some fluctuations. Then this horrible formula reduces to, so you see you have the omega here, you have to take the square root and so on. It reduces to lambda squared over 4. So it tells you that in this very special case, it's Gaussian. And so if you believe, something I will explain later is that everything depends on a single parameter, and if you are able to solve this special case, and you're able to realize that the answer is Gaussian, you see R of omega is in the exponential here, so if you realize that it's Gaussian, then somehow you get all the result. Okay, so this is somehow some known result. And now what's new is the following, is that we try to look at a more complicated situation, not a one-dimensional system, so a situation where you don't have any beta on that or something. So we have some kind of complicated or graph, and then this graph, we put a contact here at a site A or in some region here. Here we have a contact with a reservoir at density rho A, and then another contact there at density rho B. And we ask exactly the same question. If you wait for very long, if the graph is finite, then there will be a certain number of particles which will cross the system. So I can just count, for example, the number of particles which enter here or those which live there. Anyway, the difference between the two is always bounded. So in the long time limit, it does not matter exactly where I measure it. And so I want to say something about the long time behavior of this current. Okay, and for a reason which I'll explain towards the end, is that, again, that's the question that there is this parameter omega. That's true for any graph. It's not particular in one dimension. It's true for any graph that the mu, which depends on this parameter lambda, rho A and rho B, depends on a single parameter, and it's always the same. Okay, so let's try to.
This is for what type of process occurring on the graph?
Yes, at the moment,
symmetric,
yes, but in fact, you'll see that it's more general. It's a little, but at the moment it's the same exclusion process on the graph. So particles enter, they jump, but if a site is occupied, you cannot jump. Another particle cannot.
Any rates?
Sorry.
Any rates?
Yes, the rates. Okay, so in fact, the work was motivated by a numerical work by these people in 2008, and what they tried is to look at complicated networks. So here it's, okay, I think it's a percolation network at criticality, but I cannot see it very well, but here you recognize the Sierpinski gasket, and then they have measured the Fano factor, so this ratio of two cumulants, and here they increase the size of the lattice, and these are their points, and they get that it goes to 1/3. And here there is the average current and the cumulant. I don't want to discuss these curves. I just want to see this Fano factor at the moment. So it goes to 1/3, and here also. And so then I visited the Technion, and Eric Ackermann was showing me this, and he told me, can we try over fractals or over systems? So we tried some over lattice. Okay, so this is just to say that it goes to 1/3, again, when rho is 1 and rho b is 0. And so we tried the following lattice, square, and there is a contact here in A and a contact here in B, and another square where we put the contact there. But you see, in fact, there is a program where we can put the contact where we want and so on. It's just these two examples. And here it's, now you see we have different notations. So now L increasing is in this direction. This is versus 1/L. And these are the two sets of data. I don't remember which is which, but it goes, I think it's very convincing that it goes to 1/3. And you see the scale here is very small.
So what are these results, numerical?
Okay, these are numerical for these lattices for increasing the size of the lattice. And we repeated it in 3 dimensions here. So with these two geometries, a cube, And here I have a single contact, and these are the blue points. And here is a cube. There is a slightly larger contact, and these are the red points. And if you look carefully, none of these results go to 1/3. And what I am going to show you is that the theory predicts that it always go to 1/3 in 2 and in 3 dimensions, in any dimension. And then I have to say something of why there is this discrepancy. But let me just say very quickly why there is an apparent discrepancy, is that the theory which predicts 1/3 is a continuous theory, the field theory. And here, the discrepancy comes from the fact that it's a lattice effect. And when you increase the contact, then the effect of the lattice is weaker. And so if I had large enough contact, even if the contacts were small compared to the size of the system, but when I increase the contact, the trend is to go closer to 1/3. Okay, so what I am going to explain is why the theory predicts 1/3 in all dimensions and for all graphs. Okay, so now I want to discuss this macroscopic theory. So this macroscopic theory, in fact, it depends on 2 parameters. So far I have discussed a simple exclusion, but here I want to discuss a more general diffusive system. So by diffusive system, I imagine that I have a large system here, and then this system has 2 properties. When the system size is very large, then the current divided by the time, the average current, is proportional to the difference of density divided by L times d of rho when the two densities are very close. So if I am very close to equilibrium, I have a current. It satisfies Fick's law, which is here, and there is a parameter in front which depends on the density. Now, if you look at the exclusion process, this parameter is just 1. But if you take interacting particles, for example, they could interact when they are neighbors on the lattice or whatever, you would get a different d of rho. And this d of rho, maybe you can compute, maybe you cannot. But in general, you have a non-constant d of rho. So that's one property of the system. When the 2 sides are close, the difference is small, this is the average current. The other property is that even if the system is at equilibrium, when the 2 sides are exactly at the same density, still you will have fluctuations of particles between the 2 sides, and then there will be variance of Qt. So Qt is always counting the number of particles which have crossed, and so the average is 0, but the variance is non-zero, and there is a function which depends on the density here divided by L. So by diffusive system, I consider a system which is characterized by these 2 parameters. In fact, these 2 parameters are related, the ratio is related to the compressibility of the system at equilibrium. But anyway, here I will consider these 2 functions of the density. And so if I want to look at the particular case of the exclusion process, I have some choice here, d equal 1, sigma equal 2 rho, 1 minus rho. But if I want to consider systems where I have more complicated interactions, then I would have a different choice. Okay, so now what kind of theory one can write for this system? It's a theory which has been developed for a long time, but more recently there has been many very important contributions by the group from Rome, Bertini, De Solé, Gabrieli, Gionnalasigno, and Landim. And somehow now we are talking about a very large system. So if there is a very large system, then I want to discuss the problem in terms of a field for the density, rho of x and t. I start to think in terms of a macroscopic coordinate. I have a certain density around the point x and t. I have a certain current around the point x and t. And then what is the probability that I see a certain time-dependent density and current profile? And the answer, that is, you see, they don't write it this way, but the thing they can prove is something which is correspond to this formula, is that the probability of observing a certain density profile and current profile is given by this expression, where you have these two functions I mentioned in the previous transparency, d of rho and sigma of rho. Okay, so it looks complicated, but in fact it is not. If you think of what it means that the current is proportional. There is a first term, which is just d of rho times rho prime. So this is fixed law, d times the derivative of the density. So that's, I would say, the deterministic part of the current plus some noise. And if the noise is Gaussian, you see that what I get here is just j plus rho prime d over 2 sigma. Here I am talking at the moment about the theory in one dimension. And so this gives you the probability of any time-dependent density profile. There is an extra difficulty, which is that the density and the current are not independent variables. They are connected by a conservation law, which is written here. But this action and the story about the current being fixed law plus noise, it's exactly the same thing, with the fact that the noise has some variance, which is written here in terms of sigma. Okay.
So how is this derived, this formula?
Okay, I think that's not, you see, this is...
Just generally. Is it a rigorous formula?
Oh, yes, I think, yes, it's rigorous, but I am not the person to show the proof.
There must be some constraints on this, right? Why did you only integrate up to t over L squared?
Okay, because this is you rescale space and you rescale time. The system is diffusive, so somehow the profile start to change on time scales, which are the true time divided by L, the size of the system. So it's just because the system is diffusive. So you see, when I go from the microscopic variables to the macroscopic variables, there is a rescaling of space. So for example, x goes from 0 to 1, although the true linear dimension was L. So this is a macroscopic variable x, and t is a macroscopic time. So the real time is t times L squared.
But my question is, in what generality should we expect this formula to be true? Just what you wrote in the slide before.
No, I think it's proven for, again, for symmetric exclusions.
Yes.
It's
But
restricted to symmetric exclusion?
But if you take, I don't know, if you would take short-range interactions, it would not be true?
I don't think it's proven. It's true.
Okay.
I see.
Okay, so I take it as my starting point.
Okay,
and
fine, thank you.
But anyway, I am not so, for me, it's not so easy to follow these proofs.
Yeah, constrains the current.
Sorry? That's okay, I can continue. Okay. So this is this action, and then if I want to know what is exponential lambda qt, okay, so this means I want to average this, okay, I want to take this action, which is here, and I want to multiply it by exponential lambda q. And so what I want to do is to find the optimal density profiles which are consistent with a certain current, or when I weight with the current, I want to weight all the events by exponential lambda qt. So I take the action, I take exponential lambda qt, and I try to find the optimal current and the optimal density. And what I have drawn here as a picture is that, okay, if I have no lambda, if I let the system do what what it wants to do, then I will observe a certain density profile. In this case, it would be linear, but this is the dashed line. But now, if I want to weight the events with this exponential lambda q, then the system will deform itself in order to facilitate, say, this current, and so that it will adopt a new profile, which is correlated to this value of lambda. So if I want to force the system, then it will not be its typical configurations, but it will be in biased configurations. This is a profile which is biased due to this weight here. So I don't know whether I explain it well, but you see exactly when, if you take an Ising model in zero field, okay, you have certain fluctuations. Now, if I want to add a magnetic field, then the measure will be modified, and I would see different correlations, different magnetization, and so on. So this here, instead of putting a magnetic field, I just put a parameter which is multiplied by the total charge which crosses the system. So this is the profile that the system will adopt. And so trying to find the mu of lambda is just to find the optimum profile for a given lambda. And this is just trying to find the maximum of this function. And when you do this calculation, you see you have just to find the optimal function here. The d and sigma are known for the symmetric exclusion process. If you were looking at a different system, you would have different functions here. And you find this optimal rho, and you solve the one-dimensional problem. And this is the way you get this R of omega. You get okay, you have an explicit expression for this R, for this density profile.
Can I ask, so what
Please.
is the justification for taking the max or the sup as opposed, when you have an average that you have to do so?
Yes,
So
so
is that because you're looking at very large T or something?
because you are looking at very large T and also very large system. So there is a L here which allows you to
that
do
allows
this.
you to
Yes.
just
Now, that's one point, that you just choose the maximum. But in fact, it turns out when we wrote this paper with Thierry Bodino, so we were happy because we said, okay, you find this maximum, and then this tells you the full answer of the problem, the R of omega and everything. We can calculate everything. But soon after, the Italian team tried to prove what we said. And according to them, and okay, they are of course right. According to them, the optimum that you have to do is not to say, I take a time-independent profile and I try to optimize over it, but I would need to take the optimal time-dependent profile and time-dependent current. And then they try to prove under which condition the optimum is given by a time-independent profile. So in principle, you have the true variational principle would be not to say I have just a rho and a j, but I have a constant rho and a constant j, but I have a time-dependent rho and j, and to find the optimum. And so they found sufficient conditions for the optimal profile to be time-independent. And in the case of the symmetric exclusion process, it is a situation where the time-independent is the right maximum. But it turns out that one can see phase transitions. Sometimes when you vary lambda, for some systems, you can observe the fact that the optimum, instead of being time-independent, start to be time-dependent. So there is a whole story about that.
So the condition is on lambda?
It's on sigma, d, and lambda. The three things. You have some condition. But there are cases we observed where it starts to become time-dependent. But then the calculations become much more difficult. But anyway, so the time-independent solution is the right one for the symmetric exclusion process. And for some other systems, there are some bounds, some inequalities on d, sigma, and lambda that I did not write, and I don't remember them very well, but it's in their work. Okay. So now I am just repeating exactly the same story, about this more complicated graph. So I take a graph, and now I want to ask exactly the same question, the generating function of the current on this graph. And essentially, I have the same action, except now the current is a vector, and the density depends on space. I have vectors more or less everywhere. And then the question is how I measure the current which goes from here to there. And again, in one dimension, you can measure the current at the entrance, at the exit, or anywhere between. It turns out that when you are in higher dimension, you have a lot of flexibility. If you take any function v of r, an arbitrary function, you see the graph is finite, such that at a is 1 and at b it's 0, and you write this thing, this will count the total current through the system. Okay, so this is really, now you have this action, and then we try to find the optimum, given lambda, given rho A and rho B, what is the maximum of this? And when we try to find the maximum, you have to solve, so it turns out, okay, I can explain it if you want, but it does not really matter. Instead of thinking of the current, it's better to think in terms of two variables, the density and this h, rather than the density and the current. Okay, it's a little more convenient. Does not really matter where it comes from. If anyone is interested, I can explain that. It turns out that when you try to find the optimum, you find these equations to solve. And these equations are really not pleasant at all. But you see, you have to find the optimal profile and the optimal H, or the optimal current, in order to do that. And
what is H?
Okay, so okay, the H. Okay, when I read the papers by Bertini and co-workers, for me it was a big mystery where it came from. But it turns out that one way to get it is to say, okay, I have this, but remember that there is a conservation law. And this conservation law, I can introduce a Lagrange multiplier also to satisfy it. So in each point of space, I have the conservation law. So if I introduce a Lagrange multiplier for each point, it turns out that it comes with this function h. And so
Your H is like a Lagrange multiplier.
yes, yes, exactly. Okay, so you have to solve these equations, and they are terrible. And then the miracle comes. And the miracle is that if you try the following on that, you say, let's take the solution of the one-dimensional. H1 and ρ1 are just the solution of the one-dimensional system. I told you we know how to solve. And now I build a solution of the problem in arbitrary dimension this way. I take H1, and so I consider on my graph, I consider the solution of Laplacian 0 with v equal 1 on A and v equals 0 on B. So I solve the Laplacian on this domain, 2 or 3 dimensional. So I have the solution of the Laplacian, and I say, now let's consider H on this domain and ρ on this domain, given by the one-dimensional solution evaluated at v of r, where v is the solution of the Laplacian equation. Now, you take this thing, and you sit for 10 minutes, you put it in the awful equations I showed before, this one, and it solves the equation. So, yes?
Is there any way to see whether that if you take a d-dimensional system and project it on one dimension by means of a function which interpolates from A to B, like here, that if it was a diffusive system, the projection of it would also be diffusive?
Maybe, I don't know. You see, it's not, okay, I don't know. Okay, what I'm going to say, I don't know whether it answers your question. It's not that the current flows through a single path and that it looks one-dimensional. The current goes through everywhere, but I don't think that's your question.
No, your parameter, never mind.
Okay, so
Is the recipes for specifically the symmetric?
no, because there is any sigma, and no, it works for any
homogeneous lattice?
So,
So you have
okay, it's the
your
lattice.
sigma of rho of R, and for example,
Uh,
D of rho of R, so D depends only on rho and not on
Yes,
R.
yes,
So it's a
yes, yes,
homogeneous
yes,
translation
yes,
invariant
yes,
lattice.
yes,
Okay.
yes. Okay, so yes,
So it
yes.
can't be somehow some random lattice.
Yes, although it seems that it worked for the Sierpinski gasket, more or less. But yes, so yes, we assume that the D and the sigma depends only on rho and do not depend on space. Otherwise,
Correct.
probably it doesn't work.
Does this make sense in any sense on the Sierpinski gasket, which isn't a
Okay, I think already. So I don't say anything. So anyway, the main thing is that these terrible equations, you can solve them this way, and then immediately you get after some calculation. But then the main idea is here. Then you get that the generating function on the graph is the same as in one dimension, except for an overall factor. But this factor, when you look at the ratios of arbitrary cumulants, disappear. Okay. So this more or less explains what I see here. But I have still this problem of why here I get some discrepancy. And the discrepancy is not so surprising. You see, if you, I don't know, okay, I did not specify here what is the L dependence, but essentially what happens is that on this three-dimensional lattice, when you start to solve the Laplacian on the discrete lattice, you get some effect due to these boundaries. You see, the Laplacian in the continuum would be like 1 over R, 1 over R. Here it goes to a constant. So it has really to do with the effect near the boundaries. Another way of saying it is that the contribution, if you were just thinking of just a resistor network, then the resistance of more or less the bulk would be like 1 over L in 3 dimensions. And so the fact that you have a discrete lattice here adds a dominant contribution to the resistance some way. So what we think is that the discrepancy will disappear if you increase the number of contacts, so if you get closer to a continuous theory, and our data seem to indicate that, because when you go from 1 to 2, you get closer to 1/3, but of course you would need to take a very large lattice and very large contacts, even if the contacts are very small compared to the global lattice, to get the 1/3. Okay, so now let me just come to 2 points that I mentioned. One, so I want just to explain, or at least to give the main idea of why there is this parameter omega. And then I'll mention a little bit of KPZ at some stage. And then I'll talk about the quantum transport. But both are brief because there is not much I can say about it. So this is something that we obtained with Antoine Gershenfeld. And so the point is that if you take the exclusion process, if you look at this generating function, it depends in principle on all the geometry and everything, but on 3 parameters, lambda, rho A, and rho B. So now the claim is the following. You don't even need to take the long time limit. You take a finite time. Imagine that you have a finite graph, which is composed of 2 parts, and the sides of the one part are occupied with density rho A, and the sides of the other parts are occupied with density rho B. So this is my starting point. I have a product measure on the two subsets, and then I let the system evolve. And so I count Qt is just the total number of particles which moved from set A to set B during time t. And think of a finite set, although it's true even if the set was infinite, but think of a finite set. So there are several steps to show that everything depends on this parameter. The first step is the following, is that the current is a polynomial. If I take a certain nth moment of the current, it's a polynomial in rho A and rho B of degree at most n. And this has to do with the fact that all the correlation functions for this system, if I take the n-point correlation function, it's a polynomial in rho A and rho B. So that's really easy if one writes the evolution of any correlation function to realize that these are polynomial. The next thing is that exponential lambda q of t, okay, of course it's of the form exponential minus n lambda b times a polynomial of exponential lambda. That's more or less trivial because I have n a site on one side, n b sites on the other side. So the most which can happen is that all the na particles will go to the other lattice. So the term of maximal degree here is exponential lambda na. Okay, so it's na plus nb here minus nb, and the same on the other side. So this is a polynomial. And from these two facts, you can deduce that this generating function depends only, sorry, here it's rho b, it depends only on two parameters. So already it was depending on 3 parameters, now it depends only on 2 parameters. And the last thing is that if you have a function which depends on these 2 parameters, and you want it to satisfy the particle hole symmetry, you see if you replace holes by particles and so on, this expression has to satisfy this symmetry. If you put it in, you get that it depends on a single parameter. Okay, so anyway, the proof is not so complicated, but it turns out that it depends on a single parameter.
You don't mean, do you mean rho b to multiply everything there?
Oh yes, okay. So yes, so I am not lucky with this formula because, as I said in our paper, also there is a misprint. So anyway, so okay, so let me just show you one case where this parameter appears, and then it will make slight connection with KPZ. Okay, one situation that we looked at with Antoine Gershenfeld was the following. So instead of looking at a finite graph, we looked at an infinite system. And on one side, it's rho A, on the other side is rho B. And so somehow what we are doing here, I'm talking about particles, but if I was talking about temperature, it's just I take a hot system here, a cold one, and I start the contact at time t equals 0, and there will be a certain flux of particles or of energy between the two sides. And it turns out that for the symmetric exclusion process, by means of Bethe ansatz, we could get this exact expression for exponential lambda q, and it's given by this expression here in terms of this parameter omega, because I told you whatever I do, if I have rho A and rho B, I will always get this parameter omega. Now, to tell the truth, what we have been able to do is not to obtain this formula in this form, but we have been able to do the expansion in powers of omega. So we have proved all the series. So, and then we resummed the series, but somehow the only thing that we could deduce was within the radius of convergence of this series. But never mind, we obtained this result when omega is less than the radius of convergence. We assume that it remains true. And this allowed us to find that the probability of observing a very large current, so we are here, we count how many particles have crossed, and it decays like this way, exponential q cube over t, q cube over t. And in fact, it could be q cube over t on this side, but if we were looking on the other side, it would also be q cube over t with, say, absolute value. But it's exactly the same, even the same coefficient on both sides. The leading coefficient is exactly the same. So this is what we obtain from that. And in fact, now it has been proved, not with this prefactor, but the q cube over t has been proved by Sethuraman and Varadhan. With and then the question, the one question is this 1/3 or exponent 3, is it the one of the KPZ? And they say that in their paper, and of course, it's striking that you get this decay. Now, so the probability of observing a very large current decays faster than a Gaussian and Q cube over T. Now, let me just give you a very simple way of seeing this Q cube over T. And the simple way is forget the fact that the particles interact, just take the simplest case particle which just diffuse. So imagine I start initially, I have points like this, but this is just random walkers. So I have a certain density here, a certain density there, and I ask, what's the probability that after time t, qt particles have crossed? Now, a particle, so for a random walker to cross, the question is whether it is able to reach the boundary here. So if I start from distance x, the probability that after time t, I have achieved this distance is a Gaussian, exponential x squared over t. And now if I want qt of them to cross, I have to make the product for each of these random walkers. So I make the product from x equal 1 to q, assuming that the distance was, for example, 1, doesn't matter. And so when you make this product, you get exponential minus q cube over t. And one thing on which we have spent time and without success is to ask, what about when these random walkers are not allowed to cross? So if I just take, for example, I look at all the paths which do not cross, whether I could compute and whether I would be able to recover this pi squared over 12, but this was too difficult. Okay, so now the very last point is to try to make the connection with quantum transport, because all the statistics, as I mentioned, that we observed are the same as what people find in full counting statistics. So imagine the following problem. I have, for example, an Anderson model here on a strip also, or yes, on a strip, and I have some impurities. And so if I send a wave from the left with certain amplitude 1, there will be a certain transmission coefficient and a certain reflection, and the sum of the two is 1. And if I imagine that I have many channels, then the average current will be the sum of the transmission coefficients of all the channels. So this is, so imagine really I have a certain strip here, I have incoming waves, here I have the disorder and I have this transmission. Now, just by quantum effect, each new particle which comes on a channel number n, it has a probability Tn of being transmitted and Rn 1 minus Tn of not of coming back. And so the fluctuation of the current will be, the variance will be just the sum over Tn 1 minus Tn. And in fact, okay, so I don't know why I wrote it twice, this one, but anyway, that's the same, that's not contradictory. And if you, in fact, if you have many channels and you want the generating function of the current, then each channel, so imagine that I have, during time t, I have t electrons, or a number proportional to t of electrons, which arrive in a certain channel, then the contribution to exponential minus lambda q will be 1 minus Tn plus Tn exponential lambda to the power t, and you make the product over all the channels. So this, so far, is just only very, very elementary quantum mechanics. So this is what I wrote. But the main point is that when the system is large, when I have many channels, how many channels have a certain transmission coefficient? And what they say is that the number of channels which have a certain transmission coefficient t is given by an expression like that. And if you take this expression, then the calculation, of course, is easy, because if I give you the rho of t, then I can immediately calculate what happens there. and you get exactly the same answer as for the symmetric exclusion process. And the question is, how do you get this formula? And then there is a very long history saying, but on which but I read only recently, and I cannot say I feel so well with all these things because I don't know well enough, is that if you look at the distribution of the transmission coefficient for the different channels, and you look at how they evolve when you increase the length of your sample, so you go from size L to size L plus DL, then there is a certain evolution of this transmission coefficient, which is similar to what you get when you take random matrices for the evolution of the eigenvalues. You see, I think people probably know better than me this Dyson's Brownian motion of the eigenvalues. And so this idea started already 30 years ago, and even went to the stage that people like Nazarov said that this fact about transmission coefficient is also true not for this geometry, but if you had a more complex domain and you inject several channels somewhere and extract at a different place, then you will get always the same density of transmission coefficient. And then they lead to the same result. Okay, so more or less this is the end of my talk. So I tried to convince you that when the systems are large and the contacts are large, one gets universal statistics for the current, and that's true for the symmetric exclusion process, but also for over-diffusive systems. The sigma and d could be arbitrary. And of course, there are questions. One difficult one, of course, is that if we were in a situation where the profiles are optimal profiles are time-dependent, then what I said would not work. You can imagine that you take the same problem, but now you have 3 contacts with 3 densities. You see, if you had 3 contacts, for example, you could have situations where you have the Onsager relations because you would have 2 kinds of current and these kind of things. And then we tried to say, imagine that we have a 2-dimensional domain. We solve it with 3 contacts. Is it possible to map what happens for this 3-dimensional problem to another, for this 2-dimensional problem to another 2-dimensional by some kind of mapping, but we did not succeed. So we don't even know what to do with 3 reservoirs. If the domain was infinite also, we don't know what to do. And something maybe I want to try, because I wrote this program which computes the fluctuation of the current for an arbitrary graph, is to say, if I just take a random graph, what would be the prediction for the Fano factor or things like that? And okay, if there is a prediction, I have the program which can test it. Okay, thank you.